So rather than dealing with is the Bible what it says it is and the historicity and the validity of it, what I would want to do is start with somebody who really wants to know something about the Bible, is start with them on what is the Bible. In fact, you had mentioned, what do you do with a new believer? How do they get started? Where if they could get somebody to give them an overview of the Bible. When people are led to the Lord through me, and I have anything to do with the follow-up, one of the very first things I start about is I tell them, this book's hard, lots of pages. I mean, at my eyes, are not that good, but I bet this one's got 2,000 pages in it, the way it's written, or more. It's 1,800 pages, and this book was written over a period of on 4 different continents, I believe. I don't know how many authors, but I guess maybe 20 or more, and it was written from a period of 1,400 years before Christ up to about 100 years after Christ, by people that never knew each other, from different ethnic groups, multiple languages, although it was primarily written in Greek and Hebrew. There was also Aramaic and it's a difficult book to understand. So what I'd like to do is go through with them and just tell them a little bit about what the Bible is and what it purports to be and what it doesn't purport to be. It does not purport to be a scientific manual. God didn't tell us how he made the world. In fact, he gave us about 1 sentence on it.
Right.
He just said he did. So we can't extrapolate too much from that other than before he did what he did, it wasn't. And so what is the Bible? The Bible is a history of God's relationship with man. It starts out with his relationship and what he wanted it to be with Noah. Not with Noah, with Adam. And we all know the story, Adam and Eve, the sin. Then a new group started. That group got bad too. God sent a flood. We all know the story of Noah. Then he starts out, and I don't think that gets us but through 15 chapters of the first book of the Bible.
Right.
You're not very far along before you've gotten to that. Then starts the real history of the Old Testament, which is the story of the Jews. It's the history of the Jews. It's the history of the Jews between, it's really from about 2100, which is when Abraham was, till about 1000, but the real essence of it was up until Christ. And there were whole periods left out. The period from about 400 to the times of Christ was just a period of silence. So what was this? I'm going to give a very quick overview, but a quick overview was Abraham was the father of the Jews, and it took him from a part of what's now Saddam Hussein, Iran, Iraq, the Persian Gulf, but where the Garden of Eden was, took him from that area up to northern part of where Lebanon is, and then which brought him down into what's now Israel, and he told him to come, and he and his family, and he would bless them. He told them that through him, his seed, not seeds, that going to become important at some point, but his seed, which is Christ, his seed, all nations would be blessed.
Wow.
And he says, but your people will spend 400 years in Egypt, and I'll bring them out of Egypt. We all know the story. He sent them down to Egypt. We don't all know the story. He sends them down to Egypt. A lot of conversation about that in the first book of the Bible, Genesis. And he brings them out of Egypt. Exodus, the second book of the Bible. He brings them out of Exodus, and he brings them into the Holy Land, Joshua, and then he gives several history books talking about bringing them into the Promised Land, all the battles they had to win. And building the temple. They were supposed to be a light to all nations. They weren't. Long story, 10 tribes get totally destroyed and lost. The other 2 tribes, 150 roughly years later, get captured and go into captivity. So the book is telling about all this history of God being over the Jews, them being his chosen nation, and that through them he would bless all nations. So that's the historicity. Lots of ebbs and flows. They would accept the Lord, go well. They wouldn't accept the Lord, go well. Then the next section of the book is what's commonly called poetry. It would have Job, Proverbs, the Psalms in it. And these are writings that help us just to reflect, and I'll say it this way, to be said in many ways, but reflect on our relationship with the Lord, reflect on who we are, reflect on how we're supposed to live. And then the next section is where it gets really interesting. Well, that's already interesting, but the prophecies. And why I consider the prophecies, I would say something really interesting, is God used these prophecies, and most of them were for, he had prophets and judges the whole time, but after they got into the promised land. But they got particularly interesting around, 750 BC. And I'd mentioned Isaiah. They start prophesying things, and God says if they prophesy any one thing that's wrong, they're not a prophet of mine. Everything out of prophet. And so they prophesied what would happen to the Jewish nation. They prophesied about the Messiah that would be coming. They prophesied how he would die. They prophesied that he would be born in Bethlehem. That was an interesting thing. They prophesied that he would come out of Egypt, which that's an interesting thing, how he would be born in Bethlehem. He'd be a Nazarene, which that doesn't fit with the group either. So three different things like that. They prophesied to you that he would be suffering, which this was a very confusing thing to him. But they also prophesied that he would rule the nations, which we haven't seen yet. And so they were just, a lot of people say there were over 150 prophecies about Jesus in specific. And that his hands would be pierced. And so they had all of these prophecies, which vast majority have come true. And a lot of them were for their own period, how they would go into captivity and things like that. To me, one of the more fun prophecies is the Judah, the two tribes that went into captivity in Babylon. It was prophesied that they'd be there for 70 years, and after that, a man from named Cyrus would come and attack the impenetrable city, which at the time he prophesied it didn't even exist of any magnitude. And Cyrus would come and take over the city, and that he would turn them loose to go to rebuild their temple.
Yeah.
And Cyrus, who was a non-believer, came, and they told him all this. He thought it was magnificent. He didn't believe it. He said, I think I will let you go, and he let him go and rebuild the temple. Interesting story. So you have that period of the prophets. So that is the Old Testament, those prophecies, that poetry, and that history of the Jews. All of that history of the Jews and all of that prophecy is pointing to Jesus and pointing to his salvation that does not come from obeying the Ten Commandments. It's not we don't obey them, but we don't, without the power of the Holy Spirit, we cannot live a bunch of laws like that and do it in a perfect way to be before a perfect and holy God. So that's the Old Testament.